Well, the Jag Bros are back, and this is a rare podcast because it is coming after a rare Jaguars victory, a 10-6 win over the Titans. We are three brothers, die-hard Jacksonville Jaguars fans. I'm Jack, along with my two brothers, Joey and JT. We've been off for a little bit. We had the bye week. Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. But we're back. We're here to talk some Jags, talk about the future. But before we get rolling, I want to hear from you guys. What is just like your quick feelings, thoughts towards the Jags sitting here at 3-10 with 4 games to go?
Honestly, my feelings are, when is this season over so I know who's getting fired? I wish they'd just do it now so that way we are not wondering, is anyone staying or not? Like, I just care about hearing that news and moving on to next year. Like, it's nice to see some of these guys show out and, you know, this is good for next year, but I'm not watching anything for this year.
Joey, you might be holding your breath a little bit longer. I still think there's a non-0% chance that we end up rolling everybody back with the whole same coaching staff, same front office with maybe some minor tweaks, but for the most part, same people. I could be wrong. And I'm not saying that I am saying that your scenario is most likely. I'm just saying that there's not a non-zero. I think that chance is 5 to 10% chance.
I believe you, JT. That's why I want it to come sooner, because I do fear that we could run it back, which is just mind-boggling that could ever happen. With how many people are like, he needs to go, hot seat. It doesn't seem like he has any sort of game plan. It doesn't seem like he cares if they win or lose. Like, it seems like he's already mentally out of it. Like, why would you want to rerun it with this coach?
What y'all talking about? The Jags already made a big move and have moved on from their running back coach. I mean, we should be good to go now.
The one position group that actually has played decently and developed over the last 2 or 3 years. Nothing makes sense. But yeah, Jack, to answer your question at the top, though, I on a scale of 1 to 10, my level of excitement for the Jaguars at this point is a 1, maybe 0.5. It's as low as I have been the entire fandom for 25 years. I mean, this is as low, if not lower, than some of the malarkey years.
No, it's preseason again, because we're just preseason for next year. Let's
at least you have high hope in preseason.
Exactly. Well, we are going to talk just for a minute. Again, we've really shifted in the podcast. This is our second year doing the Jag Bros podcast, talking about the Jaguars. And we've obviously shifted because the Jags have been eliminated from the playoffs several weeks ago. It's been a massively disappointing season. All three of us predicted this could be the year that the Jags take the next step from 2 back-to-back 9 and 8 years. And clearly they have not. This team is really just messed up on many, many levels. So we are going to talk for a minute about the win on Sunday, what that means for the Jags. But the bulk of our time, we're going to look ahead to the future and specifically debate on this topic. What is the best case scenario for the Jags, but also what is the worst case scenario for the Jags? But before we get there, Joey, anything stick out to you from the Jags victory? It's always nice to beat the Titans, but what is maybe 1 or 2 takeaways for the Jags beating the Titans 10-6?
Here's my takeaway. The Titans are just slightly somehow worse than we are. They seem to be even more Jaguar than the Jaguar. Running out of bounds when you could get the first down, messing it all up. Like, that's what the Titans are, and that's what we are, and then we just slightly mess it up less. That's all that I got out of this. But on the player side, I did see Jerry Jones come into his own, looks really
Let's
good.
go.
Mason Smith's had a fairly good game. That could be something. I can't believe we scratched him for the entire practically year, but he's looking somewhat promising. Some of these rookies are looking really good. BTJ Jr. I can't believe that Doug's like, oh, yeah, we had to switch it up and actually get him the ball in the second half. Why was that not the game plan the entire time?
I'm at the point where I'm not even watching the full games. Like, just being honest, like they're unwatchable. I mean, with Mac Jones, it's boring football. There's nothing to see. And I think I said a couple of weeks ago, I wouldn't like us to see a full tank job and string together a couple of wins, give us some sort of momentum. But when you're playing with Mac Jones, it's clearly not going to be the offense that you're going to have going forward. For me, I would rather see Trevor get more snaps, which we're not going to see now at this point since he's on the IR, and build momentum in chemistry with BTJ and the rest of the team that way versus just limping into the finish line. So win or lose, I'm pretty ambivalent. In fact, I'd rather almost us lose, especially to teams like the Titans. I don't want to help the Tennessee organization get a number 1 overall pick, and winning at this point means absolutely nothing for us. So hopefully we lose in a couple weeks to Tennessee. And I just don't care win or lose over the next few weeks. It's probably better to lose.
Yeah, the Jags fall from 1st to 5th in the NFL draft. I mean, it's painful. No points scored by the Jags until the 4th quarter. It was an ugly, ugly game. And shout out to you, Joey. We didn't do a podcast previewing the game. We're not breaking down games, stuff like that, in these games that don't matter, but just in our text, and we threw it out on Twitter. Make sure you follow us there. Joey, you had a very good prediction. You're always predicting the Jags to win. You said they're going to win an ugly game. And it was very, very accurate. You had the Jags winning 13-10 and was pretty stinking close.
I've watched both these teams, and I saw this coming from a mile away. Just terrible offense on both sides, miserable defense, but going against a terrible offense. So you're just going to have a low-scoring game.
And I think one more reason that a lot of fans are feeling like you, JT, is not just for draft position or taking away good draft position from the Titans. It's also people want new coaches, new change. And the worse you do, the more glaring obvious it becomes that the Jags need new leadership. So I know a lot of fans are also cheering, sadly, for the Jags to lose. Like, this was supposed to be a year we took the next step. It's clearly not. And so a lot of people are like, hey, let's get a good draft pick. Let's clean house. And one of the best ways to do that, unfortunately, is to lose even against bad teams like the Titans.
When you want people to be fired, you are actively rooting against the teams, because it has to send a message to an owner who is ambivalent to any of the performance on the field at this point. I think it's safe to say. And so if all of a sudden we end up winning 3 out of the next 4 because we're playing relatively easy opponents, and we end up 5-12 or even 6-11. You could spin. You only needed 8 or 9 wins to make the playoffs. We're only 2 wins away, and let's keep everything here. And if Trevor didn't get hurt, we would be fine. Like, that's a narrative that I could see the organization buying, and I'm nervous about that. Like, that is what freaks me out. And that would be that we're about to talk about worst and best case scenario. That, in my mind, is the worst case scenario, is if that's how the next few weeks unfold.
Yeah, that's terrible, because you're right. They could spin it because they're like, oh, 7 games, we only lost by 1 score. We just fixed these 2-3 problems, like they say every press conference. Then we're going to be playoff team, possibly going very far. No, anyone watching has seen the eye test, and this team is so dysfunctional, so terribly coached. I mean, you have to wash it away. I'm just scared that, the Jets are looking to tank. The Raiders are looking to tank. Like, it's going to be games where we have to be worse than other people. And if this team's willing to fight, then they could accidentally win some of these games. That's why I want them fired now.
Before we talk about the free agencies and some of the biggest needs that we or free agency or draft, the biggest needs Jaguars have going into 2025, what is your guys' worst and best case scenario over the next couple weeks and ultimately going into 2025?
So I'm going to channel my inner Joey. Joey typically has drunk the most teal Kool-Aid and has the highest predictions, most win predictions, best case scenario for the Jags. So I'm going to start with best case scenario, because to me, there's a world if you can clean house and bring in the right GM, the right head coach, that this is actually a very attractive opportunity for a potential big name. Obviously, a lot of fans really, really want Ben Johnson. PFF talked about the Jaguars actually as a great landing spot for Ben Johnson last week. Or if it's the defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, who's been balling out for the Lions, who's had one of the best defenses, even with 13 defensive players on IR. You look at the Jags, best case scenario, you can say, hey, we've got the young quarterback. We don't have to go draft a quarterback. Trevor Lawrence has shown flashes, especially 2022 and college. There's a reason he was one of the most talked about draft prospects. You have a wide receiver 1, BTJ, under his rookie deal until 2029, which is amazing. That's a very rare thing in Jacksonville. You have a potential running back duo in Etienne and Tank. You have two great edge rushers that led all the NFL in sacks last year. You have Jarian Jones, Joey, who you talked about just a minute ago, who looks like a young cornerback who's taken steps up. You have Campbell, who's
Evan
shown
Ingram too, who I think is a really great tight end.
Yeah, you have Ingram. You have you're probably gonna have a top 5 pick. You have that extra draft picks going into next year. So there's a real world that if Shad Khan or whoever he puts in gives the decision making, that if he makes the right calls for once, a head coach and a GM, like this could be a team, best case scenario, that all of a sudden we're not going to compete for a Super Bowl next year, but starts to make moves to be a real contender in 2026 or 2027.
So what's your worst case scenario?
Yeah, what's your worst case scenario, Jack?
There's there's a lot of these. So, one of the biggest has to be that Trevor Lawrence is just not the guy. I don't want to believe it. I don't want to buy it. He's shown flashes of playing great, and there's been coaching problems. But the reality also is, I don't remember his exact record, but it's like 2-15 or something in his last starts. And now you're saddled with him for the next through 2030, paying him an exorbitant amount of money. That's worst case scenario number one. Number two, and potentially even worse, is if the Jags clean house on the coaching staff, keep Baalke, and you bring in a new guy, and all of a sudden next year it doesn't go well again, and you're like, oh, it's just a rough start for a new coach. Let's give him another year, and then you're sitting here in 2 years in the same situation because you didn't deal with the needed problem of a lack of talent. And I keep coming back in my mind to something you said, JT, a couple months ago in that preview episode against the Bears, and you're like, looking at this game, the Bears are better than the Jaguars at pretty much every single position from a talent standpoint. And this is a Bears team that's fired all their coaches, that has played really, really bad. And yet you look at the talent and you're like, I don't know many position groups other than edge rusher that the Jags are better than the Bears. Potentially this divided culture just stays longer term. They fire the wrong person like they did after last year. They blame the wrong person, and we just stretch out the problems, the bad DNA for 2 more years, and we're in the same spot. That's my worst case. Actually, that's both my worst case scenarios.
Jack, you're not even outlining the worst of the worst cases. And that is if everybody stays. That is if we win 3 out of the next 4.
True.
They spin it, and we're rolling back with Press and Doug, and all those other things stand that you're talking about. But you're just continuing to push the can down the road. And oh, by the way, when Trevor's contract actually hits in, it just puts more emphasis on being able to draft better than we already have been doing, which clearly we can't do with Trent Baalke and his organization. So. Yeah, that to me is the ultimate worst case scenario. Joey, is that where you were going to say too, or did you have different worst case scenario ideas?
Well, I was going to respond to Jack's worst case scenarios and give him maybe a little bit of hope. One in the Trevor, if you look at it, you see that Trevor's not the issue. I don't think you could put any quarterback in this sort of program and that they would be succeeding. Even if you put the best Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, they still maybe get a few extra wins, but it'd still be like a 5-8 terrible team. With the whole Trent Baalke thing is, if he's so terrible and you have such lack of talent, you just said why this is a impressive job for someone to come do, because you do have actually some talent. So it's not the end of the world if Trent Baalke stayed. But as JT said, the end of the world is if you keep Doug and Trent. You keep not telling the fans what's going on when someone gets hurt, who's calling the play. Are y'all actually like in sync on deciding on what's going on? Are you going to keep scratching each other's players out of the game or handcuffing each other and making us watch this pushover power and terrible dynamic of a terribly run organization? It's an organization failure, not a team failure. I go out there and I see good players not even being able to get a first down because it's so disjointed, it's so mismanaged. And if you keep these guys all of them, that is the worst scenario.
Joey, there's several things I would disagree with. Number one, if you put Tom Brady in or Mahomes or somebody else like that, would you have the same results? And the answer to that is no. If you just take them from
you'd have a few extra wins.
No. They have such a, let me finish. They have such a commitment to excellence that they would not allow what we are doing. They would not allow players to take plays off. They would not allow.
That's a terrible answer. That
is a terrible answer. You
could be like, oh,
it is not true. That is not true.
And be like, he wouldn't stand for that. So he obviously it would work like that.
That is not true. You can't there are certain people that have a mastery of the game and have the it factor to stand up, and the leadership quality to stand up and do the right things and to know what the right things actually are. And that's what
everyone
Mahomes
thought Eric Armstead would be. And guess what?
Eric Armstead is collecting a paycheck.
Armstead's a bum that got cut from the 49ers.
Eric Armstead versus Tom Brady and Mahomes is like they're not even the same sentence.
Before he got here was, he's going to come.
Only Jags fans, 49ers
only Jags fans said that, and Armstead never has had a history of doing that.
Baalke was saying that.
Yeah, literally only Jags fans said that. Armstead's never had a history of doing that, and the quarterback is the most important.
That they wouldn't accept that.
You're so wrong on this, Joey. We've seen Mahomes and Brady win with arguably less talent than what the current rosters have
on the Bills.
Yes, exactly. It's a culture thing. It's an expectations thing. It's a championship mindset thing. All of a sudden, you just have a belief.
They had what's considerably the best head coach of all time, Andy Reid. Like, talking about people who had amazing coaches and put them in the right organization.
You look at Brady.
Even if you don't have the best talent, if you got good coaching, you can still win. You see Malik Willis win with a not the greatest Packers team, but they're coached extremely well, and with a worse quarterback can still win because of the coaching.
Of course.
This player accepts it and plays above the X's and O's so much. It's not that much difference who you have. It's
what was Eric? What was Eric Bieniemy? Is Eric Bieniemy an upgrade from an offensive coordinator for us? Was Raheem Morris? Was Raheem Morris an upgrade for us from a head coaching perspective? Because those two have won Super Bowls with the coaches or the quarterbacks we're talking about. Patrick Mahomes is, yes, what also happens? The defense also gets better, and not magic, but because they have a belief that the offense is going to be able to score and that we'll be able to bail them out. There's a culture that permeates when you have that belief. Trevor, I'm not saying can't get there. In my mind, Trevor at this point in his career is very similar to Goff in where he was in LA, which I like what you were saying, Jack, about Ben Johnson. He clearly has unlocked Goff's potential. Joey, to your point, coaches have the ability to unlock that potential, but there's also just the level of expect. Like if you put Brady on this team in his quasi prime, or if you put Mahomes in his team right now, the record the Jaguars have is significantly better, if for only one reason is that we lose so many one possession games. How many times has Jacksonville actually had the ball in the fourth quarter to win? And those guys are clutch. They don't make the same mistakes that Jacksonville makes time after time after time after time.
Okay, so I'll pose a question, JT. What do you think would be more beneficial? Let's just say Jaguars get Patrick Mahomes and bring him here, or the Jaguars go get Ben Johnson and make him head coach? What would be more beneficial to the team?
The obvious answer is Mahomes, but it's never going to happen. So it's a stupid question.
Realistic.
Fine, Joey. You go for okay. Would you rather have the 15th best quarterback or the first best quarterback, or would you rather have the?
I'd rather have the first best coach than the first.
That's not even you could make arguments that he's not even the first best coach, and he's never actually been a head coach before. There's a lot more. There's a lot more variables.
Andy Reid or Patrick Mahomes? The best quarterback or the best coach?
Again, I'll take quarterback. I mean, Andy Reid's coached a lot of teams and he maximizes the current talent. But if you're giving me the chance to have the best coach or the best quarterback, I'll take it every day. Can't remember if it was Wooden or one of the other coaches always talked about what a coach can do is maximize or minimize their talent by about 20 to 25%. So that the output that a player gives is 20 to 25% higher with a good quarterback and 20 to 25% lower with potentially a bad coach. Sorry. So if you're telling me I can all of a sudden upgrade my quarterback, even with somebody who is potentially getting Mahomes's floor, is still right now better than Trevor's theoretical ceiling with a really good coach. Jax, break the tie for us.
I didn't mean to have us go this direction necessarily, but it's hard. It's almost impossible to argue that you're not going to take Patrick Mahomes here, because you look at what the NFL values, who gets paid more, the quarterback, who gets traded for more value. We've seen head coaches get traded before. Quarterbacks get traded for infinitely more value. And you almost never see a superstar quarterback leave a team because you build around them. In many ways, the Jags have handed Trevor Lawrence the keys and brought him in on more and more decisions. I mean, there's a real world where next year, if they do run it all back, that Trevor Lawrence has more power than anybody else in the Jaguars organization. It's at this point still a very quarterback-driven league. But I wanted to talk too about this difference, because best case, worst case for the Jags becomes really, really interesting, because I think there's a massive difference for the Jags and Jags fans between potential and talent. And I think a lot of Jags fans get caught up. And look, potential can turn into talent. Potential can turn into results. But the reason that I'm beating the drum so hard against the Jags needing to move on from Baalke, in some ways, honestly, more than the coaching staff for the Jaguars, is because all we do is get potential. And other than Brian Thomas Jr., there's been no one who's really overachieved from what we thought. And we keep saying, oh, one more year, the right coaching staff, That's Trent Baalke's MO for 4, 5, 6 different head coaches, and none of it has panned out, even with great coaches like Harbaugh. I'm just telling you, if we can move on from Baalke, and this is an opportunity that you can bring in a new team, because they've got to work together. Head coach and GM have to work together. And so that's why I keep saying one of my worst case scenarios is that we move on from the wrong one, because the reality is Ben Johnson ain't coming here if Trent Baalke is the GM.
The Harbaugh thing, but that was a good team. They just didn't work because they butted heads. It wasn't because the talent was so bad.
He didn't build that team. He inherited that team. Everything went downhill in San Francisco as soon as Baalke got there. He had 2 good years.
I will say, I think Jack is right. I would rather have somebody that's singing from the same hymnal and running the same playbook, metaphorically speaking, for the entire organization. Even if, and here's the knock against Baalke, Joey. I think I can see what you're saying, in the sense that if you look back in the Jaguars 2013, 2014, the last times when they were just bottoming out and horrible, this roster is much better than that. I mean, we aren't starting bums off the street. Like our receiving core, our kind of core group of players are fine. There's not a whole lot of up-in talent. Like if you're ranking the top 100 or 150 guys in the NFL, there are very few Jaguars that would even potentially be on that list. But like there's solid NFL base hits and double base hits.
I remember being a Jags fan and people be like, "Who's your wide receiver?" I have to be like Allen Hurns or
exactly.
No name person.
Cecil Shorts. Yeah, no, you're right.
You would never draft any player on their fantasy football team because you never heard of them. Maybe you pick them up on a free agency for 1 week. But you never. Yeah,
we're not trying to go backwards. We're trying to go forwards.
Yes, and so here's my biggest issue with Baalke is, even if you say he's done a decent enough job with the talent roster, the coaching is certainly worse than the talent roster currently has. I think we all three would agree with that. But he's also had 2 top 5 picks, as well as multiple spending sprees on free agency that others haven't had. So he's had some resources to do that. And Jack and I would both argue that he hasn't done. But the biggest issue is everywhere Baalke has gone, he's butted heads. And that type of contention within the organization bleeds into everything else. If you have your boss is always butting heads with your boss's boss, or 2 VPs have completely wild different strategies about how to execute something, and you just keep both of them, everybody's just like, I don't know what I should do. I don't really care. I'm just going to wait until they figure it out or one of these guys leaves. So the worst thing you could do, to everybody's point here, is keep both of them. I think the second worst thing you could do is keep Baalke, because he has a history of butting heads, but honestly, so does Doug. Doug has a history of butting heads with his GM. When they drafted Jalen Hurts, he wanted nothing to do with Jalen Hurts and threw a big fit and kept trying to put Wentz out there and refused to play Hurts until the point where he got fired. That's the only reason why he was fired from Philadelphia. It's not because of the record. It's because of this contention. And we're just stuck with two extremely contentious people.
You can see it with the whole Mason Smith thing. He isn't so bad that he needs to be scratched.
Correct.
And it's obviously that Doug must have wanted someone else in the second round so badly that he has been using that jealousy or anger, or I'm not sure the exact right word, but he's using his ability to pick who's on the 53-man roster and constantly scratching someone who could actually be more of a benefit than, say, Lacey or Ledbetter. But you don't know because you have people fighting against each other on the same team. I'd rather you be like, that's not the person I wanted, but I'm willing to ride with you and do it together because that's the only way you're going to succeed.
It's everyone throwing each other under the bus. It's dirty politics in the Jags organization because to use that exact example of Mason Smith, and of course that's getting a lot of publicity for Jags fans still watching games because he actually got the most snaps of any defensive tackle this past week. So I don't know who convinced Doug to finally play him. And yeah, he's been decent. And we always knew he was going to be more of a project potential guy. So you might as well get him snaps. But I remember 2 months ago, Baalke tries to force Doug's hand where he goes out and trades Roy Robertson Harris, who's having a good season, and you get nothing in return. You get a 6th round and you're still paying Harris's salary anyways. And so it's just this internal fighting that is just devastated the team. And I said this after the win in London, but you watch the Jags victory speech by Doug on Jags YouTube or Jags social media, and nobody's excited. Nobody's cheering. It's kind of fake clapping, and everyone looks like they do not want to be there, even after winning against your rival on the road. It's crazy.
Oh, I know. I mean, there's more evidence of this with the whole trade rumors of Christian Kirk. All of a sudden, everyone's like, oh, he's definitely gone like next week. And then all of a sudden, he's the only person you throw to, and you make your entire game plan around Christian Kirk. Now, obviously, I don't think it's right to trade him. I thought it was right to keep him, but you can see the disconnection already of them not being on the same page and constantly trying to do against each other. You saw the media ask Doug Peterson, oh, who told Shad Khan that this was the best team that's ever assembled? And then he was like, it wasn't me. Like,
that was awesome.
Constantly disconnected and throwing each other under the bus and not liking each other. Someone has to go. Most likely, hopefully, both go. But worst case scenario, you keep both.
Yeah, that is the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, look, Jacksonville's talent. Here you go, Joey. If you were to rank just pure talent Jacksonville has, where would you rank us? Because I would say we're ranked probably somewhere between 15 to 20. So we shouldn't be the 32nd worst team in the league, which is what our coaching staff is doing. But we're
15 to 13, a little higher than you are. I'm not saying that we're the best. Obviously, we have good talent, but the gaps in between those talents are bad. I think you have a very good edge starter. You got nothing behind it. I think you have one good corner and you got nothing behind it. You have good wide receivers, but you don't have that good of an offensive line. Like, you have high ups and you have low lows. And to be able to shoot up more, it would be to fix a lot of those lows. You got to fix those gaps. And unfortunately, it seems like Trent Baalke never wants to fix those gaps because he never gets a third edge guy, signs defensive linemen, but off of free agency for like someone you've never heard of. He doesn't go get like a splash guy. And then the one splash guy you get, you make him edge guy because he's not an edge guy. Like,
yeah, I don't think we have as many lows. Like, there's not as many glaring holes. I think you have guys that are like, when they do the Pro Football Focus rankings of like this position out of this group, I think you have a lot of guys in that kind of 20 to 40 range, especially at positions where there's multiple guys that they're ranking. So when we're thinking about the needs for Jacksonville, to me, it's just about getting talent that can replace to be better. Whoever is available both on the free agency or the draft pick. It's about going best available because it's almost certainly an upgrade over who you currently have. Even though we like Campbell at his best, he's probably a top 15-ish corner. And so there's guys, if you can get a better corner than him, great, do it. Like go out and get, I don't really care about the position outside of maybe a couple. Go upgrade, because you can almost certainly upgrade it at every position, but no position's horribly black hole in my opinion.
I agree too. And it's going to be interesting. So we're got a couple games left and we've done part of our rebuild series, and we're going to, of course, get into more free agency and draft, but it is hard other than quarterback, which now you're going to need a backup quarterback because I don't think you're bringing back Mac Jones. It was a fun story, but has not looked pretty at all. There's really no position off limits that you shouldn't view to try to upgrade. Even one of the positions I would think is more of a lock, such as tight end. Ingram has been a beast, and Britton Strange has shown a few flashes, and you hope that potential can turn into more. I mean, there's a real world where the Jags, if they do kind of go more full rebuild, would trade him. I've seen that floated more. So it's really any position. And this is where, again, you have a lot of draft picks. You have some cap space, although that's going to get really hairy.
The only thing I'd say about your thing, Jack, is I actually think Mac Jones is here because his play, obviously, no one's going to want him. And I think the Jags will sign him super cheap and keep him as a backup again because he is a Jacksonville guy. Like, he's going to only know the playbook a little bit better, or whoever brings him in. I just don't see anyone picking him up. So I think you sign him super cheap and you keep him. That's all I would say.
Good. We love getting the guys nobody else wants.
Well, I mean, it's not like we're going to go out and get Jameis Winston or Joe Flacco or one of these guys that have proven as a backup if you run into those issues. So I agree with you, Joey. Whether you have Mac Jones or CJ Beathard or another guy who's just as comparable, that type of stuff I think doesn't matter per se.
Correct.
But, look, I think as a Jaguar fan, the thing that's the most concerning is it feels like that worst case scenario is not impossible, where we are keeping either all of our coaches or most of our coaching and GM. And that in all of our minds is the worst possible case scenario. There are scenarios where you clear house, you have a decent core, and you could quickly turn this around. We see it all the time. Teams go from a horrible mess to all of a sudden competing for a championship, or at least competing for the playoffs. Look at the Chargers. Go look at, seriously. Go look at Commanders. Go look at some of these other teams that are making this transformational change. Heck, even Houston from 2 years ago. The transformation to have that is there. And if you look at all the other teams that are 2 and whatever and 3 and whatever, like we are, all of them don't have a quarterback. We, at least in theory, have a significantly better quarterback than all of them. So there is a potential upside, but it starts with making some changes culturally, especially at the top. So that's where we'll leave it here. Thank you for the person that left us a 5-star rating. They did not leave a comment or their name, but appreciate that, guys. If you like our content, continue to push that button to allow us to help with the algorithms. It's been a tough, challenging year for the Jaguars over the last few months in particular, but hey, the optimism's always around the corner. We're going to get a top pick. Let's see what we can do and hopefully see some big changes going into 2025 season. With that, we are the Jag Bros, JT, Jack, and Joey signing off.
Dude.